This week I've dug out my Target SSB HF3 receiver. Normally it's put away in the box. It's kind of a backup receiver. I bought it a couple of years ago, brand new. But I've got quite a range of other receivers in the shack, and this one I've really got put to one side. So I've taken it out of its box. I'm going to set it up in its own little space in the shack, and I'm going to do a little bit of listening with it this week and treat it as if it was my only general coverage receiver and just see how we get on with it. It's a very basic receiver. It's got its digital readout. It does AM mode and SSB. I think it's got 5 or 6 memories built into it, and you've just got the volume control and the tuning control here. Very simple to operate. It has a couple of little disadvantages, I would say, as we'll see later on. The display here is not backlit, so you can't use it in a dark room. You're going to have some light. There's no backlight on there whatsoever. And at the rear, if we just turn it around, we need a separate 12 volt supply. That's no problem. We've got no external speaker socket here. We've just got a line output, which you could use for feeding into a computer sound card to decode data, but it's no use as an external speaker or a headphone socket. And you see the antenna connector quite unusually is one of these phono sockets, so it's not a problem here. I've made up an adapter with the phono on one side, and we've got a PL259 on the other, so I can plug that into my main antenna system, whichever one. I'll probably use it with my G5RV wire antenna that I use for amateur bands transmitting as well. And we'll just see how it performs and how we can get on. These things are still available new, I believe. There's something just under £200. They do have their limitations, but they're not a bad little receiver. Let's see how it performs day to day. Okay, I thought it'd be nice to have a little look at the history of the HF3 receiver. And this article takes us back to October 1996. It's from Shortwave magazine, and this is when the HF3 first came on the market. It's a Target HF3 here, made by AKD. And there's a kind of small review here. They've got a hold of a pre-production model. They've noticed that there's a 2 kHz error on SSB on the digital readout. And there's a little bit of a criticism of the phono socket for the antenna here as well. Interestingly enough, all this was the same 20 odd years later when I bought mine. So given that these receivers still seem to be available new, they've had quite an impressive run from 1996 to 2020. So you've got 24 years of production and sale. Here's an advert again from 1996 of the AKD. Ideal way to start the hobby. So it's obviously targeted as a starter receiver. And by November 1996, Shortwave magazine had got hold of a production model, and they've reviewed it. You can just see the conclusions here. Again, they've mentioned the antenna connector. They've mentioned the 2 kHz display offset. They've also criticised here the lack of headphone or external speaker socket. So it seems that the first models had neither. But you can probably see on the right here that following this review, it was decided to install a headphone speaker socket on the rear panel. Now, the more modern HF3 that I have doesn't have that. In its place, it has the low-level output for data decoding. So that was a little bit of a step backwards, I think. But you can just see from this little bit of the review I've reproduced here that they seem to think it's a pretty decent receiver. They say that the price point it comes in at, it's competing with Taiwanese-made portable receivers, but it knocks spots off them in performance. So they think it's a pretty good little radio by the looks of this. And just finally, we'll have a look here at a screen grab from a website that I visited very recently and found that the HF3 is still on sale as a brand new receiver. You can see here it's £169.99. They say it's reduced from £225. Still available, so 24 years later, that's not a bad run. In the shack, as you can see, we're using a 12-volt power supply to power it, and it's plugged in as I thought I would to my G5 RV. So we'll see how it compares. We've got quite a few other receivers here we could use and have been using, including the NRD525 here, and the Drake R8B and the Kenwood 5000. But this week I'm going to be using mainly this receiver. Let's see how we get on.